Welcome to another exciting episode of the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast. And I seem to be getting a reputation, to be speaking constantly to innovators, creators specifically in the EdTech space. And I have an amazing guest on deck today. I'll leave that for him to unpack. We're going to be talking about status technology, right? Where they say that they are an educational program for children that uses technology and its opportunities to explore and accelerate their growth. We are going to unpack that in a few seconds. And I have with me Triumph Tetteh, who's going to speak, and unpack what status technology is and the amazing work that they're doing. I'm excited, really. Day in, day out, I just happen to bump into, really passionate individuals who are just racking their brain. With all the guests I've been speaking to so far, there's something I tell them up front, just dipping my toes in the education space. There's one component I've realized: you need to have passion and commitment. I mean, it was evident in our, with our interaction last. There's, the passion and the commitment was very palpable. And immediately I said, yes, this guy, I have to speak to him. I need to unpack what it is that they do and what their tech solution is doing and it's solving in the marketplace. So I'm really happy to have you on deck with me today is Triumph Tetteh. Triumph, absolute pleasure having you here today.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine.
Awesome.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here as well. Let's jump right in. Triumph, give us, I'd like to hear the background. What's your background? What's the story? Give us a brief introduction about yourself, your background. Let's hear that.
Myself, I finished aerospace engineering at KNUST.
Okay.
Yeah, that was, let me see, that was 2013. Yeah.
Okay.
2013. Yeah, that was 2013. So after university it's almost 11 years. Yeah, it's 11 years since I came out of KNUST. Coming out of KNUST, I mean, I've always been a tech engineering, passionate about engineering and technology, right? Yeah. But in my final years in KNUST, precisely, I think my national service years, I stumbled upon education in a very informal way, right? Okay. And how this happened was I started, so I'm a pianist. Let me just add in there.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a pianist. So I stumbled upon education because I started teaching children, specifically the lecturers, the lecturers I was working with as a research assistant, right? So I did my national service in KNUST as a research assistant. So while I was in my national service, I started teaching, piano, right, to other lecturers, children, right? And that was the beginning of education for me, because this was the first time I was actively teaching, right? In the past, I've probably helped, back in school, you help your mates study and all that, right? But this is the first time I was actively teaching. So I was teaching them piano, developing a curriculum, seeing how they learn and all that during my national service time. And I was amazed, right? I was amazed and intrigued by how our children think and how their minds work, right? And how they're able to grasp information. Before then, as I said, I hadn't really taught kids. I think I had done one studies, taught some kids, but teaching someone to be able to play piano, it's a journey, right? You start from the beginning and then you see the person's growth, right? So in interacting with these kids, I found out how well they assimilated knowledge, how well they grasp things, their aptitude, even aside the piano, how they talk. It was so rich. You get me? The experience was so rich. And at the back of my mind, I sort of drew a graph, right? Saying that, okay, if this 8-year, 9-year-old child is like this at this stage, right? Assuming the child gets a consistent education and exposure, right? Like he had already started getting, how should a child be by the time the child is like 20, 23, 24, 25? So I was extrapolated in a sense that, okay, if this is the development a child can achieve at 8, 9 years, then what can that person achieve at 25 years? And the correlation to me, it didn't add up, right? It didn't add up because then I was like, okay, I even remember so many people in like grade 2, grade 3, they were like very good, right? They showed so much potential. But along the line, maybe they still stayed good, but their experiences did not give them that, keep them on that trajectory to success, right? So in my brain and my analysis, I realized that, okay, the journey everybody takes tends to be particular and it tends to be special, right? And depending on what the person experiences on that journey, it can either make the person or unmake that person. So I was like, okay, what if education was predictable instead of being not predictable? You and I will attest the fact that most of us, our education has been unpredictable, right? In a sense that we follow a certain trajectory, we get somewhere, then we ask ourselves, okay, what next? Okay, what is next? Do I have to do this to get here? Do I have to do this to get here? Okay, what am I now good at? What am I not good at? There are these questions, and even whether we get the opportunity to even explore what we are even thinking about, it's also another thing, right? So in that, I came to myself and I was like, okay, what if we can create a learning experience, right? Or a journey for every child that is able to take them on their own journey from education to career, using data to what? To tweak their experience every step along the way to get them to that what successful place everybody wants to get to, right? And that was the whole idea because I was curious about, is it possible to predict someone's educational to career journey? Is it possible to actually control that journey, right? So if I see you at maybe 6, 5, 8 years, whatever, can I pinpoint certain things based on, I mean, interacting with you that can be developed, right? And if these things are consistent and if we are able to tweak and give you the right experiences, can we forge your journey into a career throughout, your entire journey? So that was what I set out to do, to create a more predictable form of education, right? An education that can be analyzed, that can be studied, that can be tweaked at each point with the intention of helping a student from the onset to become successful, right? Taking away all form of uncertainty, all form of guessing, right? And using data and feedback to provide the right experience for children to when they develop their career. So that was where this whole thing started. And it
Really,
has taken me on this journey that I am.
really, really interesting. I mean, as you're speaking, my mind just journeyed back into when I started school, at least the parts I could remember. And I was just making certain, connecting certain dots. And, the part where you mentioned that it seems a lot of, the outcomes that we were looking for, it
Exactly.
was more based on hope, right? The
Yeah.
hope that,
Yeah.
we are
Yeah.
hoping that guy, just as they are sharp in class 2 or class 3, we are hoping
Yeah.
that they'll be able to make the right decisions,
Yeah.
when they get to
Yeah.
SHS and then when they get to university.
Exactly.
And that's literally trying to take a shot in the dark and just
Yeah.
hoping that things are going to work out.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
seeing how, with regards to Starters Technology and its mission and vision, how it's saying we are going to leverage on tech, right? And that tech is going to allow us to gather data that is going to, based on the child or the group of children that we are dealing with, gather that data from the get-go, right? I'm guessing
Yes.
from the
Yeah.
moment they start school, right?
From the get-go.
Yeah, gather as
Exactly.
much as much information as possible for us to be able to, predict in a sense, or guide, in a sense, have that eagle's eye view and then guide the whole
100%.
process. Brilliant,
Exactly.
brilliant,
Exactly.
absolutely brilliant.
Exactly.
Um, Let me take you back a bit. right? This started when you finished the KNUST, right? So you're looking into planes, and then now you've ended up in education. But I want to take you
It's
backwards,
crazy.
right? Would you say there was a certain context in your childhood, right? That maybe from your mom, your dad, or from some family member, or even maybe a teacher
Okay.
way back then, that has influenced, that sort of influenced the path that you're on today, right? So
Oh, okay.
there's this bit where you mentioned that you started teaching piano. For anybody to teach
Yeah.
anybody anything, trust me, it's no joke. That's why I'm taking you all the way back. Is there any influence from your childhood?
Yeah. So everything I have done has actually, there has been an influence,
Interesting.
right? Yeah. But the influence has been like in layers.
Mm.
So for example, me wanting to do aerospace only happened because when I was young, my one of the few toys, I was not the kind of person who like got toys, right?
Mhm.
But one of the few toys, or probably one of the only toys I got was an airplane.
Mm.
Yeah. And that stuck with me. That stuck with me. My mom went to Accra. She came back. She had a toy airplane, which, lit up and all those fancy things.
Mm.
That stuck with me. And honestly, that's why I pursued aerospace engineering, right? Even in the
Mhm.
first place, right? Then another toy that my mom also got for me was a piano. This was very
Mm.
early stages,
Mm.
right? So that's piano. So it was, these toy pianos when you play one note, then it plays a song. You play another note, then it plays a song. That was also another toy. So yeah, these two toys I can clearly recollect. And these toys actually shaped my journey to the university.
Mm.
Now, when I got to the university, that's when other things began to shape my thinking. First of, for example, working with these children who were my lecturers' kids, right? Definitely shaped my education trajectory, right? But also books that I read,
Mm.
right, on entrepreneurship also shaped. It gave me the willingness to jump into the deep end without knowing what I was going to experience,
Mm.
right? Yeah. So in a nutshell, though I did, I had my first experience maybe teaching um, a neighbor somewhere in our community. Two main things that shaped my journey, or the main things that shaped my journey earlier on was the toys,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And then when I got to university, the books I read about entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
right? And then my encounter with children from my lecturers.
Mm.
These are things that, they did not necessarily push me over the edge, but they got stuck with me. And then I had to take decisions based on the images I had created in my mind.
Mm. It's crazy though, because when you think about it, right,
Yeah,
it just goes to tell you how parenting, how teaching, how guiding and nurturing the next generation
yeah,
has to be very intentional.
100%, 100%.
And I see how it's tied to your outfits status technology, and it's really making me think, to be honest. It's just making me
Yeah,
realize, if my parents put certain books in front of me at that time, I'm sure I would have probably
100%,
been doing something else.
100%.
It's
You
crazy.
know, sometimes I
Mhm.
tell people who call me, yes, like, oh, my child is this years, I want to get him to start doing things in tech, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
You need to get the person around certain things
Yeah.
because children at a very early age,
Mhm.
they learn from what is around them,
Mm.
right? At a very
Mm.
early age, you are not trying to teach the child, you are trying to imprint a certain worldview,
Mm.
right, in the child's mind for the child to soak. So what the child
Mm.
is exposed to around, what the child is hearing, what the child is seeing, what the child
Mhm.
is playing with, these things are they are very, very sensitive. That's why in a classroom, the environment you create in a classroom like this
Mm.
is very, very critical,
Mm.
right? If you want your child to play football,
Mhm.
chances the best way to get him is to have something there that he kicks on a field. Like
Mhm.
those things begin to tweak the mind. Because at an early age, their brains are not formed at all, right? There's a chance, or you have the opportunity to begin to mold their mind very, very, very early.
I mean, you're speaking, and this movie just came to mind, King Richard. That's the movie with Will Smith. I mean, it was basically talking about the Williams sisters
Yes,
story,
yes.
you know,
The
and how, their father, Richard Williams, who was a father and a coach, immediately, the two of them came out. He was so insistent and he was so intentional. I mean, it alludes to the points that you just made, that his insistency, consistency, and overall leadership, right, has birthed, two amazing tennis players, the world has ever seen, and yeah, wow, you've really got me thinking, you've genuinely got me thinking about something awesome, really awesome stuff. Listeners, we didn't joke when we said 2024 was going to be an amazing year. The guests we're going to get on are going to be sharing perspectives that is definitely going to open our minds, give us a certain perspective angle that we probably might not have been paying attention to. And so I'm really happy I have Triumph with me today here, who is sharing some really, really, really good and interesting insights. Triumph, diving in, I'd like to take, I want your opinion on, I want your take on the disruptions and innovations that's happening in education. There's a lot going on.
With respect to Ghana.
Yeah, with respect to Ghana, yes. With respect to Ghana, yes. Let's start home first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good happening, but I also think there's a lot of I don't know whether I'm using the right word, fluff, right? I think that we need to I think that teachers are probably the most important part of the entire process, right? Yeah. If you joke with teachers, you are joking with children, or you're joking with students. I mean, you can't achieve the goal of excellent students if you are not ready to achieve the goal of excellent teachers. And I think that is probably one of the areas the country really needs to work on, right? First of all, I'll say that, I mean, any country that manages to set up an educational system has already started something, because you have given people a place, right, to learn, right? So you always have a certain group of people, irrespective of where you would put them. Once you give them a space to learn, they will do well. You get it. But we need to consider the other 70%, right, who require a more deliberate effort in order for them to excel, right? I'm talking this way because status is all about individual learning experience, right? Child A is not the same as child B. Child C is not the same as child D, right? So the school system is designed in such a way that if you have certain traits, you do well, right? So, for example, if you are good at listening, right? You're good at taking notes. You're good at reproducing the notes, right? You are good at like there are certain skills that people have. If you have it, right, you will do well in our regular class, right? Now that is beginning to change, right? They are creating other more like practical structures or practical, education systems, which is very, very good. Oh, which is amazing. But we need to go a step further and help teachers more. Help teachers more. The worst teacher should be good. Do you get it? Yes, because that worst teacher is going to have students, right? And out of these students, 30% will be able to go through that worst teacher and still come out successful. But 70% will not. You get me? Because that 70% require more effort. They are not like the regular Ghanaian student. You get it? I feel like a lot of attention should be given to teachers, whether it's through motivation, through training, even recruiting the right teachers in the first place, right? Yeah. Also, I'm saying this because I work with so many teachers, right? Because we provide a customized learning experience, we tend to work with a lot of teachers, right? And I meet teachers. I know how the right teacher, right, can affect even the wrong student for him to become the right student.
Mm.
Do you get it?
Mm.
So a lot of emphasis needs to be placed on teachers. I think that we should not joke with teachers at all. If there's anything that we should hold number one, is teachers. An excellent teacher, well, a teacher can come into a classroom. There might be nothing, there might be no tool to use, but the teacher can still create an experience that will be worth it to the student. Do you get it?
Mm.
A bad teacher can come to a classroom, can have all the tools,
Mm-hmm.
but will still not be able to create that experience for the
Right.
student. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so our ability to train the right teachers, one, first of all, recruit the right teachers, train the right teachers, and maintain the right is everything, right? Else, at the end of the day, we'll have 100 teachers and only maybe 10, right? 10% of the teachers will actually be what? Making impact. And hence will be affecting probably just another 10% of the entire what? Population, right? So I think that the country is in the right direction, but I feel like we are focusing on so many things when our number one focus should be teachers.
Mm. Wow, that's a really interesting perspective because with all the chats that I've had so far, and even with ours, just a few minutes ago, it's all pointing to the fact that teachers are or play an integral part in whether or not our educational system will be successful or not.
Yeah, very.
And I think my previous guests also alluded to that point. And I think I remember making a point that even the whole conversation of having and running a school is, is a much more Herculean task than we make it seem, because you are
Yeah.
literally nurturing the next generation of people,
Uh,
right? So whatever happens in the classroom is actually a great indicator of what the future is going to look like, what those human beings are going to look like, what skill sets they are going to have, what value systems they are going to have, what attitudinal foundations that they are going to have,
100%.
and
100%.
oof, it's giving me goosebumps. Really, I have to be I have to be honest, because I just realized how it looks like I'm still coming back to the point where it looks like a lot of things are being left to chance. Where one, in the public sector, there seems to be no clear policy direction as to what sort of outcome that we want to see in terms of our human resource. So when
Yeah.
somebody when somebody graduates from maybe primary or JHS or SHS, or from a TVET college or from a university, what do we want to see in 10 years,
Yeah.
20 years, 30 years, right? And then when you flip the coin in the private sector, we're having a situation where we're having a lot of these school owners, proprietors, proprietresses that just open schools, and it's purely business.
Yeah.
It's become this capitalistic endeavor to where, oh, we can make money off providing education. But then day in, day out, with the conversations I'm having with people I'm meeting, and with my understanding getting deeper, I'm realizing how it's not a job that anybody should just enter.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of weight there, and it requires people, one, who are
Yeah.
committed,
Exactly.
people who have the heart, the soul.
And you know, one of the things that is happening,
Mhm.
because teachers most of the times are underpaid.
Hmm.
Every teacher is looking for another job.
Wow.
You'll be surprised. Not even just every teacher, but the teachers. Because you see, for you to be a good teacher, you have to be good first of all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
First of all, you have to be like technically good. One.
Hmm. Hmm.
Two, communication wise, you have to be
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
You should be a good communicator. There is no way you are a teacher and you can't handle a class. You get me? You should be empathetic, right?
Hmm.
Because you should be able to see a student and know that no, this student needs extra help.
It's a
This
big
student
one.
needs this student needs that. You need to have good analytical skill, good critical thinking. Like there are a lot of skills that come into play, and you need to be patient, right?
Hmm.
There are a lot of skills that come into play with being a teacher. That makes a teacher, depending on the field though, that makes a teacher a very good candidate for other things.
Mm.
So you'll find that in this part of the country nowadays, a lot of people are transitioning, right? They are transitioning, as in they are a teacher for now, as they prepare for what they really want to do. You get me? Very few people are saying that, okay, I want to be a teacher. This is my profession,
Calling, yeah.
and I'm going to be a teacher. And it's generally because the salaries that teachers usually get, unless I mean you are a top teacher or you're working for like some of these top schools, I mean Lincoln, GIS, and the rest. Those there. So, but sustenance, right? Whether a teacher comes into the class comfortable, whether a teacher comes to the class without thinking of, where his next meal is coming from, without thinking of that or this or that. Again, a teacher's mind is everything. We need to protect our teachers. We need to make sure that they have sound mind. They need to have things like rewards. I don't know, count. Like a teacher's mind is everything. Because once the teacher steps in the class, know that everything that is coming out of that teacher's mouth, you get it, is going directly to the children. So we need to give them that, level of importance, right? Because if you are saying that, okay, these people are responsible for training the next generation, and you feel that the next generation or your children are important enough, then shouldn't that thing or those people be valued together? In equal, it's a this thing.
So imagine we have this, unfortunate crystallized thoughts that, the teacher's reward is in heaven. Now, just thinking about it just makes me realize how we are not, we are just far behind in terms of even having the conversation for real.
Apart
We are
from
clearly
that,
not placing value on the work that they do.
Exactly. And it's even more obvious when a teacher is not even given the resources to teach. Because then it's like you haven't, assuming that the resources can be gained, right? You haven't thought of what that teacher needs, or you haven't considered the teacher enough, knowing that the teacher needs this to make his class effective, right? You just assume and hope the teacher will be able to work some magic. Again, it's like employing engineer in your company, right? And not giving him the things he needs to get the work done. How on earth is he going to get the work done? Yeah, so just to summarize the whole thing on education, we are doing a lot. We are up and about, but let's take our time and deal with our teachers. Let's address the issue of teachers and solve it in a very holistic manner, right? That, if you want to build the best company, you get the best team, like the best individuals, right? For that company, right? People that can achieve. It's the same with teachers. If you want to build the best country, or if you want to build a good country, it starts with the teachers.
Yeah.
Right? The teachers, because it's the people who will come out of these teachers who you now hire in your industries, who will be in government, who will be here, who will be there, who will be there. So if the channel or the pipe that we are going through, right, that we go through to emerge at the other side, if that pipe is not strong enough, then definitely a lot of people will not make it.
Charlie, interesting, really interesting insights being shared. I'll say that one of the things I really do appreciate about the job that I do as co-host is I really get to hear what's happening on the ground. I don't hear things from some of these sources. I get to hear it from the horse's own mouth, people who are on the ground and doing the work. And I believe that in order to get our education space in the direction that we want it to, in order to get us the outcomes that we want, these real insights need to come up to the fore. And the hope is that it will get us to a space where we have the real conversations, just so we can come up with the real and practical solutions to solve them. Interesting insights so far, Triumph. I genuinely do appreciate you coming on sharing these. Okay, so let's delve into the conversation around tech, right? I want to throw this at you. Was COVID-19 a blessing for education in Ghana and by extension across the continent? That's a dark question, but yeah.
That's a nuanced question. You can say yes. I mean, I'll say yes, right? Even though I had very bad experiences, but I'll say yes. I'm putting my experience aside,
Okay.
and I'm answering it in a more analytical manner. So, if you look at the data, definitely I'll say COVID-19 was a push in the right direction for some reasons, right? If you look at the net, whether it's net positive or net negative, I think it's a net positive. Yes, there are some negatives, but I think that it's a net positive. Reason why I think it's a net positive is because, one, it made parents, right, get more involved in education, right? That's the first that I'll say. It made parents begin to understand education a little more in terms of what their children are doing, get more involved in their children's journey, because the whole homeschooling and all that or online learning came into scenario. Two, it allowed people to know they could do things, they could educate themselves in an unconventional way. So I'm still talking about like the net positive, right? In an unconventional, which goes a long way to let people know that apart from school, I can still like learn and make it. Do you get it? Because now people begin to, okay, if there's no school, what can I do? So that's self-development, that mindset of, okay, because more people began to think of, okay, home learning and all that. So that's self-development. Okay, I can train my kids to do this. Okay, they're not going to school, but we can do A, B, C, D, right? So it started getting people to think in that direction, not just like the regular school, but even people who were like universities and things like that. Because during that time, some people took advantage of it to do what they wanted to do, basically. And that was such a net positive for a lot of people, right? It also exposed the weakness of in-person, right? Hence, it allowed schools to become more adaptable. If COVID-19 should happen again, a lot of schools that won't struggle, right? Because they've learned from the previous example, right? They've learned from, okay, we can do things online, we can have classes online, there are tools, there's technology, there's all that. So that willingness to adapt, emerged, right? Previously, if you tell someone that, or if you tell a parent that I'll teach your kid online, it was a weird thing to think about. You get it? But now it's more acceptable, right? And all these things allow us to break away from the conventional form, right? Because education should not be boxed. Again, it should not be limited to this is the only way you can learn. Even if you put it in a structure, in that structure, it should not be limited, right? So, I think these are some of the net positives. It also allowed teachers to also think more tech-wise, think more like tech-centered, because a lot of teachers tend not to be tech savvy, right? Which is weird anyway, but a lot of teachers tend not to be tech savvy. Hence, it forced teachers, even nannies in homes, you'd be surprised. Nannies in homes had to become tech savvy, right? Which began to shift, because if a nanny can now use a PC, chances are that in a few years, she's not going to be a nanny any longer. Do you understand? So it began to, it changed the industry, not just education, but tech-wise, right? It reestablished the foundation for technological savviness, right? Where maybe before, you being tech savvy meant you could maybe turn on a TV, right?
Right.
Now, you being tech savvy means that you can host a Zoom call, right? Like that kind of thing. It changed the where tech savviness starts from, right? It gave people, it opened people's minds to things right? Yeah. So I think net wise, it was positive, though there are quite a number of negatives as well.
Mm,
Yeah.
I mean, really interesting. You touched on the points that I align with a lot. I mean, despite the fact that a lot of unfortunate things happen, I know a number of schools that just shut down just because COVID
Yeah.
came up.
Yeah.
There was a lot of headless chicken running around because they didn't know what to do.
Yes.
But then, I mean, with all that, the clearly was the silver lining, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
I think the standout for me was where I began to see a lot of indigenous tech-led products and innovations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I realized, yeah, we showed it showed the resilience of
Exactly.
our people, and I mean, it's also sort of made a dent in the stereotype that
Yeah.
all of these tech
Yeah.
solutions can only come from the West or outside of the continent.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I was really happy about. And I mean, when I talk to people within the edtech space or education technology space, I just give them their flowers immediately because I'm like, hey, I mean, this shows that at least our education counted for something, right? It's in a situation where everything was all doom and gloom. We were able to leverage on our knowledge, leverage on the tech, the available tech, to say, hey, instead of doing A, we've come up with this solution that can do this, and it's made in Ghana here, right? And it was really a heartwarming thing to see and experience. Awesome. This is perfect
100%.
segue into your outfits. Let's talk about starters technology. I know you've touched on it in bits and pieces, how it started and all, but let's put the spotlight on it. Give us that story.
Starter story.
Yes, the starter story. Yes, the starters technology story. I know you've
Okay.
touched on it in bits, but just
Yeah. Yeah.
zoom in, and give us unpack it for us and
Mhm.
and our listeners.
Starters technology, we solve two main problems, which is what I always say, right? That is one, that every student is different, right? Hence, should not be taught the same way, right? So if you're in a class, 30% of the class is likely to do well because you have certain traits that fits that class, right? The rest of them, their characteristics or how they are, their personality is not one that allows them to thrive in class, right? So science technology came to solve that problem. So we custom design, right, programs for children, and the approach that or the way that program is administered, right? So one, the content, how the content is delivered, these two things. So we custom design it for every single child, right? So even if in a home, 3 children, know that each child is taken care of as a separate person, right? Without necessarily duplicating the approach, depending on what that child needs. So that's one. Then two, we wanted to solve the problem of education, innovation, and career feeling like 3 different things, right? In a sense that when you start learning, it's like you're learning, 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 you just learn. Then now it's time to work. And you don't know how to do the work, right?
Exactly.
Or you've learned and then, but you get to a point you're like, I want to create this. And you don't know how to create it. You get me? There's that disconnect. One doesn't necessarily translate to the other, right, in our system. So the second problem, or what we're trying to solve, is finding a way to make education, innovation, and career exist in the same or exist in the same system, right? So as you are learning so that you can innovate, right? As you are learning so that you can fit into what? A certain career, right? As you are innovating, you can go backward and learn. As you are in your career, you can also what? Learn to improve that career, right? As you are in a career, you can think more of what? Innovation, Do you get it? And then education can also now borrow from what? Career and innovation to improve that education experience. So instead of them being treated as three different things, which once you get to a point, it's like you were never prepared for that, right? I mean, we do what from class, let me say from class 1 to university, right? It's like approximately, let's say 15 years, maybe less, right?
Yeah.
You go through that 15 years and you can't say you are ready for a career. Do you get it? In the same way, you go through that 15 years and you can't say you are ready to create an innovation, right? So at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to merge all these three things so that one is dependent on the other. One is happening so that the other can happen. They are coexistent in the same system. So these are the two problems that we're trying to solve. Personalizing educational journeys from education to career, and then finding a way to have three elements: education, innovation, and career coexist in the same system.
I mean, as you were speaking, the thing that was just coming to my mind is education has to be relevant. Education has to be relevant. Education has to be relevant
100%.
because it's if it's not, then what's the point? You might as well just not gain that education at all. Yeah, it's
100%.
absolutely brilliant, and it's exciting to hear, an outfit that is taking a sharp focus on that and ensuring that the three key areas are mapped out in a way that gets, a net positive.
Yeah.
Clearly the idea that people still come out of university and like, oh, what are your interests? Is this something you're looking or you're considering? And it's like, oh, I don't know. I'll figure. I mean, there's space for that. Don't get me wrong, but then I think the general evolution of the world, right, in general, with regards to everything, including tech, should help us, get us to a space where some of these things are a bit predictable, right? Immediately we
100%.
immediately we notice certain talent, certain skill sets that you naturally have. Immediately we are honing it and pushing you in an area that we know you are going to thrive and make the most impact. So it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant stuff. Really,
Yeah.
really brilliant stuff. I want to jump straight into the successes. What are some of the successes that you've talked since inception?
Okay. So successes, I'll sort of take you through the journey, right?
Okay.
So we started in 2017. Yeah, 2017. That was when Status Technology began, right? When we began, the question was how to approach it, because I've told you what we wanted to do, right? But I've not said anything about how we are doing it, right? Yeah. So now that was the next thing. Okay, so how do we create personalized journeys for people, right? We started with workshops. Okay, that's honestly where we started from. We started with workshops and then using tablets. Okay, this was like in the very early, time. So we started with workshops, and then we would have so this was 2017. We'll have tablets, right? And then we would have like so many applications on these tablets, right? From math to science to coding to just random games, computational thinking to programming, like so many, right? Then students would come, right? Then we would take them through different applications. We'll see how they were responding, right? Then based on that, they will stay more on certain applications, or they will, like, we were tweaking their experience on that tablet, right? Based on how they were using the system, right? Or how they were using the applications, right? Then they will begin to learn things that they've never learned before. Some of them will start writing their first code. Some of them would enjoy the math more, right? Also, too, because you are using applications, you have more, how do I say, more customization. Again, one application might be like this, one application might be more playful, and one will be more technical. Did you get it? So you have like variety to experiment with. So those workshops that's how we started with Saturday workshops. We were doing like one every probably 3 months or even between 3 to 6 months, right? So we did that twice and we realized that, oh, people wanted more of it, right? Then so that was, I mean, you could even call that our first experiment or maybe our first success, because that was pretty successful. During that time, I don't think there were a lot of people doing even anything on like teaching coding and things like that. Probably apart from a few, maybe STEM Bees had already started. I think maybe Maker's Place. I don't know if they had started. So we were doing that, and then we started organizing Saturday sessions, right? The Saturday sessions, we were doing a lot of things like programming, right? Things like programming, electronics, maker activities, right? We're engaging them with different things, still seeing where their interest is and then steering them towards those places, right? A lot of our programs we used, we were looking at paths that did not have something I call gatekeepers, right? So, for example, if a student likes medicine, right, and wants to be a doctor, there are very strict paths the person has to take, just opposed to if the person wants to be maybe a designer. Do you get it? There aren't that many strict paths. So most of our programs, right, or tools or content that we're using was based on paths that did not have gatekeepers. So, right, okay. So Saturday, then we're like, okay, we want to like grow, right? We want to get into schools because I figured that one of the best ways to do this was getting into schools. Okay. So, our goal was to go into the schools and create a, a personalized learning experience for each child, right? So we went there, we managed to get into a few schools, and along the line, I realized that it wasn't working. It wasn't working in the sense that what I wanted to achieve and what I was doing were not the same, right? At that point, I'd gotten to the phase where I just wanted to grow. You understand? But I I assessed myself and I was like, nah, yeah, I want to grow, but what I intended to do, creating a personalized experience, is that what I'm actually achieving? Because the systems of a school are different, right? Especially when um, your whole personal experience is a 1 week, it's a 1 day, 1 hour thing that you're trying to achieve with the students, and you have maybe like 30 students in a class. It's not that easy to achieve that, right? So COVID-19 came, right? And it made it gave me the chance, even though it was a blow. Okay, I wouldn't lie. COVID was probably one of the biggest blows I experienced back then, because now I still get blues. But it gave me the chance to, reevaluate a lot of things, blah, blah, blah. So we stopped working with schools, right? Because I figured that was not how we're going to achieve our mission, right? So then we launched into, one-on-one at home clients, right? And the way we would do it is when a client calls, right, that this is what I need, or I want my child to, go on your trajectory, your experience, we would interview the child, we'll go through a series of activities. All that is to collect a fair set of data, right, from the child, not just from the child, and from the parent. So all that is to collect a fair set of data to know where to even begin, to know what kind of teacher would be right for this child, right? To know what kind of tools will be right for this child, to know even how many hours the child even should be doing, right? So we collect this data, and this data helps us to get the students started, right? That is what we have been doing for a long time now. In the process of, teaching, we go back to collect data two times during the child's specific programs, let me call it term, right? We go back to collect the data, tweak, talk to the teacher, talk to the supervisor, adjust things along the way. So it's a very hands-on thing that we do for the students, right? Making sure that we are bending the path, because no path is straight, right? You don't just go in a straight line. There
Definitely.
are ins and outs here. So we, manage those ins and outs. And I would say our journey has been a very slow journey. We've grown very organically. Recently, I think probably a month ago or so, we crossed our first 100 students, right? Since when? Because we started home tuition after COVID, right? So that would be like 2020 or 2021,
21,
they're
yeah.
about 2020, 2021, thereabout. So since that till
Yeah.
2024, right? So it's been a very slow journey, right? So we crossed our first 100 clients, but it's been fulfilling, especially when you find that student who wouldn't have done well in a class. You get it? Where you find that student where you know that this student, if this student wasn't on our journey, it wouldn't be like he wouldn't get this experience, right? Because especially when you find like the out of the norm kind of students, right? A lot of the time and the work and all that makes it fulfilling, right? Yeah. So we've been doing that for a long time now. I mean, just to take you back, I said that our goal has been to build experiences, right? So our home tuition, which we call Steam Spark, okay, is one of those experiences, right? Because I figured that in order to be able to tweak experiences, you need to be able to create experiences, right? If this student needs this and this and that to properly walk through the education to career journey, we should be able to either create, right, or direct that child to that experience, right? So we've had to create other experiences. And one of the other experiences which we've created, apart from our home tuition, is something we call STEM storybooks, right? And STEM storybooks was started when we discovered a student, right, who was always reading cartoon books, right? But struggled to like listen to what you are saying, right? Then it took my mind back to how well students are able to pick information from, let me call it entertainment materials, right? Or things that are more animated, things that are more friendly, things that are more gaming, right? In a way, right? So we started with a new experience called STEM Storybooks. And the goal was to make learning as fun as possible, right? But also as with much information as will be in a textbook, right? We set out to do this. This was actually like 2021. It was in the face of, us finding getting back on track to creating new experiences, because we diverted because we wanted to grow, work with schools and grow. But coming back, we had to, really forge ahead. So yeah, we experimented with a topic that I felt was technical enough to see whether we could take this technical topic and then make it into a story that students will fall in love with or will appreciate, right? Because it's easy to remember something you like, just opposed to something you don't like, right?
Definitely.
It's easy to learn content that you enjoy, right? So we took the periodic table. We said we'll create a book about the periodic table, right? So we took the periodic table and the elements of the periodic table, we turned them into characters, right? So we had chlorine as a character, we had argon, we had neon, we had krypton. We have a whole bunch of story, yeah. And then all these characters have like special abilities based on their properties on the periodic table. They have like special powers. that they use
Smart.
in their community. So we developed a full story on that, and it was accepted. The storytelling part, everything was accepted well by students and by kids. We did like, when you gather people to read a book.
Like book clubs.
So yeah, we worked with some book clubs,
Okay.
and one of them being Booksy,
Oh, I know
who I think
Booksy.
you should interview.
Yeah.
Okay,
I know
nice.
Booksy. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where we Booksy, we where we Booksy, and we interacted with the students just to get a feel of how they will respond to it. We did a read along, and we asked them questions from the book and how well they understood it. Bear in mind, they had no idea this was even a topic in science. They had no idea because these are 7-year kids, 8-year kids, right? But they are enjoying chlorine and what chlorine can do.
Can do.
You get me? Not knowing that this is something that people in SHS are cracking their heads over trying to remember. Yeah, that was our first attempt at STEM storybooks. After that, we produced some others, right? Some for electronics, some for math, right? Yeah. So that was our second experience that we created, I would say, right? Then, as I said, still on this journey of experience, along the line, we realized that our home tuition students, right, our STEAM Squad students, they were lacking in certain experience, right? And that was being able to work in teams, right? Because we were giving them personalized experience, but as part of the experience was the experience of working with other students. So we came up with something called the robotics group, right? Where, they come together, they work on robotics competitions, robotics missions, and then they go for competitions, right? This is another part of education, or it's another part of the experience that some thrive on, right? Some thrive on other experiences, some thrive on competitions and things like that, right? So we started robotics group. That was, I think, 2022, right? So we started as robotics group, and we've been growing since then. Inside started robotics groups, we had to, the challenge we have faced is the scalability of it, right? So for instance, with home tuition, we train facilitators, right? So we have a platform known as the onboarding process, starters onboarding, right? That's actually what makes our home tuition even feasible, right? So we built this system where we take a facilitator, and we train you. First of all, we get to know who you are. We take your data, blah, blah, blah. Then we train you. We take you through a certain process, right? Through an online platform, right? Where you take a series of assessments, tests, you go through lessons. It is in all preparing you to join our team, right? And we had to do this because, doing a home tuition program means that you are trying to reach everywhere in the country, right? And in doing that, you have to, one, get people, you have to train people because there's no way I can go to every single house. That's not scalable. So we needed to build a machine that can produce the people who we send out, right? We also identified that most facilitators who come, it's a transition, right? They spend maybe 2 years, 3 years with us, right? So we are also trying to use that to build a career community, or a career-based community, because every facilitator who comes to not just teach, but also improve him or herself, right? So we are currently taking advantage of that to, create a community and create like talks around it for targeting career and career development and things like that, right? Our hope is that, our students, some of our students will come, intern, pass through the system again, right? As well. Yeah, so I think just last year, our first team had the opportunity to go to Denmark to compete in the World Robotics Olympiad. That's our first. This was the first time our robotics group since 2022 has gotten the opportunity to travel, right? So that came out of the robotics experience that we create for people, right? Currently, we are trying to make that experience more modular in the sense that we are trying to take the robotics club experience to homes because, because we are everywhere, right? Tansuman, Tanswa, like we are everywhere because we send people, right? Because we are everywhere, there might be a student at Taswa, right, who wants to, or who also needs that competition experience, right? It is because it's location based, right? They have to come to a place to work as a team.
Right.
Hence, there's a problem with scalability, right? Hence, currently we are trying to solve that. We are trying to solve that by creating family and friends robotic clubs, right?
Okay.
The idea behind this is that two families or friends can come together, right? And starters would help them to set up a robotics club.
Mm.
Do you get it? And then it becomes a similar module as our home tuition module, but this time it's a group of people or friends in the same area, families who have put together that structure, and then we would serve them, right? Achieving this will definitely solve our time and space issue, right? So that is that. So the whole thing with creating experiences is what brings out these experiences is actually the students that we encounter.
Right.
Based on a student or based on data we receive, we know that no, we need this, right, to help a certain group of students who require this type of experience. We need to create it for them. Hence, that has been the road that we are on. There are other things that we've been doing that we are working on. I could go and go, but yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Wow. As you were going on, my mind just went back to the statement I made earlier about the fact that if you do not have a certain minimum level of passion and commitment to
You can't.
to enter the education space, you might as well just not even look there at all,
I didn't even talk about
Uh-huh.
our child development center.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Which we started because we realized that the early education,
Mm-hmm.
right, that the children could benefit from, some things were missing, right? So we started a child development center also, and that one we started just the latter part of, or the mid part of last year.
And I mean, clearly, I mean, as you were speaking as well, all what was coming to my mind is this is clearly a purpose-driven brand, a brand that is coming into the marketplace to change the way we view education, to give us a different perspective or angle to the way we go about executing education in order to get the outcome that it is that we want. And it clearly shows that, I mean, as you were going on unpacking the different things, it felt like a tree, right? A tree with different branches, right? All of which is targeted towards getting a certain particular outcome. And listen, what I particularly like is the phrase with which you used to describe, going about all of this, which is you were curating an experience. That flips the whole conversation of, education and then teaching and delivery. It takes it to another level, right? To where now there has to be a sit down, there has to be some level of critical thinking, and there needs to be creativity, there needs to be a certain flexibility with the way you go about wanting to get your students to experience a particular topic, right? And listen, going about the periodic table, right, and having it in a comic book format, I'm not sure if I experienced that I'll ever forget the periodic table. And
100%.
imagine having that from a very young age, right? Imagine, and you see, it goes back to the conversation I think I had with three of my guests as to the fact that they clearly, with proper leadership, right, with a proper assessment of the reality of our education space, right, if you're able to have those difficult, those tough conversations, and we get to the point where we are able to say, okay, this is what we want our human resource to look like in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we'll be able to, get the brightest of minds, right? And I commend you any day, anytime, based on just what I've heard and what you're doing, and, get them together to come up with a way that is going to be very unique, right? Something that is going to be associated with what Ghanaian, or African education should be, and what you said has really just blown my mind. My mind is genuinely blown, and I'm sure my listeners are appreciating the in thinking, the creativity, the interesting bits to where it's like, okay, we started one bit, right? We are realizing a problem as we've moved to this level, right? So what can we do? What can we come up with to be able to take care of that problem at this particular level of education, right? Which is all going to be connected to get the sort of outcomes that we want. And it clearly shows. It's crazy how time flies. Our conversation has just gone the conversation has just
I
gone
know
on
it.
and on.
Entrepreneurs are probably one of the group of people, if you leave them to share
You
experiences,
know, you
we
know,
have so many.
that's very
Like,
true.
there's so much. We don't get to talk about
Yeah.
what we are doing
Yeah,
enough,
yeah,
honestly. Not
yeah.
just what we are doing, but what we are going through. So there's so much to say that has not been said,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
honestly. So
mm-hmm.
much.
Listen, I really do appreciate the expressing of the entrepreneurial journey, and I'm sure for our listeners who are entrepreneurs and are listening in, it doesn't matter what space, whether it's the education space or whichever space you're looking to enter, appreciating some of the things that Triumph said is one way to go. There's definitely a lot of leaves to take from his book in terms of the approach, the taking a pause, reflecting, networking, having conversations. There's also the bit about research, right? Going to the ground, right? And dealing with the customer, the person that you are trying to, create that solution or that solution for. And coming up with ways that solves the problem in a way that is a one-time thing. It just hits the nail on the head when you come up with that solution. And all of this is to get us into a mind frame that allows us to be flexible in our approach when we are thinking about the solution that we are trying to solve. Triumph, I'm definitely getting you on. There's so much to unpack with Status Technology. I've heard about about four to five different branches of this big tree that you have already. I know there's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure my listeners are itching as well to hear all of that. We would have to wrap up here. I want to say a big thank you, big heartfelt thank you to you, Triumph Tetteh. Optimism and your passion is clearly evident and it's infectious, and really, 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 well and truly, it's a blessing to have people like you and your team and your organization existing in the education marketplace today. I'm happy when I hear these sort of really passionate and committed individuals, right? So thank you. Thank you for who you are and what you do. Please, this 2024, keep that fire burning. You should burn more grease to your elbows
We'll
and
try.
continue to
We'll
make.
try.
We'll be here rooting for you all the way. Continue to make that transformational change and impact, one
Thank you.
student at a time. Thank you so
Okay.
much for hopping
Yeah.
on.
Thank you, Tom, for having me.
Awesome. Awesome. And to our listeners, listen, if you had the notebook by now, it would be full. The notepad will be full of notes as to, so many bits. There's so many gems that were dropped, so many insights that were dropped. To our listeners outside of the continent, this just goes to show that there's a lot of ingenuity, there's a lot of creativity, popping up on the continent. There's so much that is going on, and we are happy. We are happy at the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast to showcase that to all of you. If there are possible collaborations, if you want to get to know Status Technology, you want to know more about Triumph Tetteh and the amazing work that he's doing with his team, please reach out. Reach out. You can get them directly on LinkedIn at Status Technology. They're doing some really amazing work.
Wait,
You
can I visit our
felt,
website?
oh yeah, there was a website. Please shout the website.
StatusTech.com.
Status Tech. Okay.
So,
Okay.
so Status, STARTERS,
TERS.
Tech,
Okay.
TECH
Right.
.com.
.com.
StatusTech.com.
Awesome.
When you get
Awesome.
it, you will see
Awesome.
what we are doing.
I encourage all of you to check it out. They're doing some really amazing work. Yeah, I believe collaboration, on many fronts will make this thing, spread across even the whole continent, gets the youth population that is growing every day to shape their destinies and position them or put them in a position where they are able to add value to themselves, to make impacts in their own small communities and their countries and the continents at large. Until next episode, I told you 2024 is going to be a big one. We are definitely having Triumph back on to talk about some other stuff. Until next episode, please stay safe. Cheers, guys.